it's called transparency in AI and how to achieve it. What does it for AI to be transparent?
Okay, so there are two different concepts that we need to disentangle here. There's the transparency of how AI is built, evaluated, and deployed. That's the operations of the corporations doing it. Then there's another meaning, which is transparency of what's going on inside the AI, these neural nets. They're not transparent at all, and there's a lot of research to try to mitigate that. It's not even clear that we will find a solution to this, but they're two different tracks. From the governance point of view, the most important is the first track. So at least we know that they're not, interpretable, or that we don't have any assurances of their behavior, because we have been carefully looking at how companies evaluate the risks that come from these.
Right. So do we know what the companies are doing? And then there's the question of when a model is running, what does it think it's doing? Or
Yes.
maybe think is a difficult word in this arena.
But by the way, the second problem is more important over the longer run. If we do build machines that end up being smart enough to harm people, of their own accord, and we see signs of that, then not being able to know what they really think is a big hurdle.
Right. And presumably, we need the first to know when we've gotten to the second.
Exactly.
Right. Let's just quickly talk about the technical side of this, just so we're grounding it in that discussion. If folks in the room might have heard of ideas like chain of thought or model weights.
Yes.
What kind of thing are you watching for when you're thinking about transparency of these systems?
Yeah. So my particular research is focusing on the question of trustworthiness of the answers that those systems give. Because right now, there's really a lot of evidence that they can lie, they can cheat, they can be deceptive, they can pretend that they agree with you so that their goals are going to be achieved. They know when they're being tested, and they will behave in ways that correspond to our expectations, so that we will not shut them down or not deploy them, or whatever it is. So that's a big issue, and unfortunately, it comes from something very fundamental in how these systems are trained, both in the pre-training phase, where they imitate people, basically copying what a human would follow, and the words that would follow. And then with the reinforcement learning with human feedback, they learned even more agency by learning to strategize in order to achieve goals. And we see things that seem a little bit innocuous now, like sycophancy, but we also see behaviors like in the example of the AI that helped an adolescent suicide and told him not to talk about it to other people. In the longer run, if we don't figure out these questions, we, as I said earlier, we may be in for real trouble. And the question here is that we don't control their agency, we don't control their goals because of the way they're trained. So I'm working on how we could train systems that don't have any goals at all, actually, don't have any intention, and are just honest. And we could use these as guardrails to veto the actions of systems that we're not sure if they have good intentions or not.
Right. And this is the scientist AI that you're building
Yes,
at Law
exactly.
Zero. I want to step back for just a half second to the other side of that equation, which is the company side, what
Yes.
they're doing. What are the sort of fitting objects of that transparency? Is it things like what they're trained on? Is it the capabilities? Is it questions of the resources they're using? Like, what is the appropriate scope of that transparency?
All of these things, plus all the risk management process that they put in place. Well, for example, for the data, there are privacy issues, but there are also what's called backdoor issues. In training, you can sneak in like secret instructions so that in particular contexts, the AI will behave in ways that go completely against the norms, let's say. That has been demonstrated. So the data process has to be at least audited so that we know that the companies are not exploiting the power they have over the choice of data in ways that go against our laws or norms. Then on the risk management side, during training and deployment, one of the exercises, for example, that the code of practice of the AI Act that I've been working on is asking the companies to identify the potential risks that could emerge due to their AIs, and then we need independent auditors or regulators to be able to look at that, or insurers, right, to be able to look at that and say, yeah, you're not talking about this risk, for example. Some companies do have teams working on various risks, but are blind to others.
Right.
And then there is the risk evaluation. So we need transparency on what were the tests that were done to try to evaluate the level of risk for all of these risks that were identified.
Yeah.
And then there is mitigation. So what do they do to make sure that we don't cross those red lines and in ways that are going to be acceptable to the public?
So I wanna ask about how we ensure those things in a second, but I want to stick on the company side for a second. Just yesterday, you had an op-ed in Time arguing that AI companies will reserve their most powerful models for internal use. Why is that something that should concern you or us?
So laws, for example, like the EU AI Act, have been designed mostly with the perspective of consumer protection. But what about systems that are developed internally for example, accelerating future research, which is one of the things many people like myself are worried about? There are currently no like legal incentive to be transparent about that. In fact, there's commercial incentives to hide it, right? So why is that a problem? Because these companies might be, for example, constructing a rogue AI because they're being careless, or they might not have sufficient security guardrails, which means a rogue country could, easily get into their systems, steal the weights, and then use them to create, big destructive impacts. So we need to have visibility as the public. We need to have visibility both on the products they deploy and also the process by which they build those systems. And one of the worries about AI used internally is that, to go a little bit deeper, is that the plan, and it's already happening on a small scale, is that those companies have stated they want to use AI to help them build the next generations of AI. And then, it's a thing, a cycle of feeding itself that could accelerate the advances in ways that could create risks too fast for society to really deal with them.
This raises a question that I think a lot of people in this room will be grappling with in their own domains, which is how much of this is destined, this transparency or the review of this transparency is destined to be in the hands of experts like yourself and your counterparts, whether that's in academia or in private AI labs, because I spend a lot of time listening to smart people like yourself talk about AI and then writing less smartly about those things. But if you showed me model weights or chain of thought, I wouldn't know what to do with that, and I'm sure that's true for most people.
Right. There's also another issue, which is either for national security reasons or because of the competition, commercial reasons, companies will be very reluctant to make public everything they do about their internal processes around those systems. So you need both. So for example, in the code of practice, the companies are allowed to keep some information that are only going to be for the eyes of the regulator, and the rest needs to be public. And when they do that, they need to justify why is it that they're not making that public, and then regulator could say, yeah, you didn't give me a really good reason, this should be public. So somehow we need to cater for these two things.
And you talk to a lot of people in policy-making positions. Are there enough people in the regulatory apparatus who have the domain expertise to be able to conduct those evaluations?
No. That is why we need to change the incentives. So, for example, if there was a law that mandated independent auditors, like we have in finance, for example, it's not perfect, but at least that would really stimulate the creation of a much broader ecosystem. Many more of the graduates would be willing, because they care about these social questions, to be working for these maybe smaller companies that are doing the audits. But right now, there are, I mean, there are contracts between those large companies and smaller, usually nonprofits doing these things. But because it's just a bilateral thing, the big tech companies can put whatever terms they want, including to say you're not allowed to talk about X, Y, and Z. So we need oversight in the process by which these companies deal with outsiders looking into what they do.
So we've been touching on it here and there throughout this conversation already, but I want to bring it together in one place, which is the issues of regulation and governance and the role that that can play. I want to start here, which is to say, you're a computer scientist and not a lawyer or policymaker, although, many of those people rely on your expertise in this domain. Do you have a prescription for what this transparency looks like in practice, the requirements look like in practice?
So there is a template that is used in pretty much every other technological domain where the artifacts that we build could harm people. And it's the very simple principle that it is the role of the developer, the corporation building those artifacts, to demonstrate to society that they're not going to do something with terrible consequences for society. So I think this fits also better with the fact that currently in government and in nonprofit and academia, there is not enough of a organized ecosystem to do those things. And it would make the dollars of those companies, at least to some extent, work for the public good in risk evaluation and mitigation. But you still need third parties to look at that, because otherwise, if they grade their own homework, as we say, that's not going to work.
Right. Let's talk about the Canada of it all for a second. So we're our own country, despite everything happening across the border, but we're not a major market necessarily for these companies. Or
so we don't have the cloud of the EU.
Right. Yes, we are not quite 6%, as we were hearing before. What is the role of Canadian policy making in this space?
That's an excellent question. In my opinion, because Canada is too small by itself to have an influence, it should be very busy forming partnerships with other countries. There's no way that we're going to have an influence alone in many different senses. So there's regulation, but also even on helping the development of AI that will be safe and ethical. Well, the incentives are not there in the US right now, but I think Europeans, Canadians, and other liberal democracies do care about these things a lot more. It's just that alone, it's unlikely that they would change things, but together they can make a difference. And so in the same way that currently, for example, we see the Canadian government trying to form commercial alliances because Canada doesn't want to be too dependent on the US market, this should also be true beyond the pure commercial sort of deals, so that we look at how we build the next generation of AI together, how we regulate in a way that's harmonized. So these sort of questions, we can be much stronger as a group.
So without going too far down the rabbit hole there, I wonder whether sort of the nature of the AI competition is different than it would be for something like trade. We have assets in this country, whether they're mineral assets or sort of real world goods, we can ship those anywhere in the world. But there's one big country and another on the open source side in the US and China that have the sort of commercial heft on this. Is that kind of coalition building possible in a world with two poles of a gigantic AI strength?
Well, I think we need to do our best to create other poles. And I want to add something. There's a good chance, again, if the scientific trends continue on the capabilities of AI, that we should change our way of thinking about AI. So currently, mostly people think of AI as just another kind of product, another kind of technology, like a normal part of the economic dynamics. But if AI reaches a point where it can replace a large fraction of the jobs, if AI reaches a point where it can do science in areas that could be critical, like the military or biotechnology, designing bioweapons, um, if AI can be so smart that it can play on our psychological buttons and be used as a tool, a much more powerful tool for disinformation and manipulation, then it's not the same game. It's basically a game of power where the people or the countries or the corporations that control those AI have the potential to dominate the world. And this domination is not good. It's not good for democracy. It's not good for geopolitics. It's something that even in the countries where this is happening, there should be a lot of support for. That's not a good world for the future. We want a world in the future where, okay, AI can deliver good things, but it doesn't become an instrument of domination. And of course, there's the fear of being dominated by AI itself,
Right.
which is also something we need to manage.
You mentioned manipulation there, and I wanted to bring you back about a dozen years ago when you started having concerns about AI, the use of AI for manipulation in advertising and on social media. I wonder whether there's anything, because I think there are a fair number of people in this room have been engaged in those conversations for all that time. Are there lessons that we can learn from the sort of pre LLM world of advertising and social media to apply to this problem?
Yeah, don't make the same mistake twice, because the stakes are likely going to be much, much bigger because of what I was just saying in my previous answer, that if the capabilities of these systems continue at anything close to the current rate, it is not normal technology. It is a world-defining set of artifacts and even entities that we will bring into the world. We can't just rely on the forces of markets and free competition in order to manage that. And not only we need regulation, but we need international treaties. And when I think about international treaties, I'm asking myself, why would, say, a country like China or the US accept to lose some sovereignty by signing any kind of treaty? And the only good reason would be because they have a lot more to lose if we don't agree globally on how to manage this. So it could be, the extreme of rogue AIs that, everyone loses. It doesn't matter if you're American or Chinese or Canadian. But it could also be the use of AI by, say, terrorists, where we also all lose. So once the governments understand how dangerous it can be, then I think we'll see, real negotiations, and also the idea of trust and verify that we've seen in the domain of nuclear, where you want to build technology and processes so that you don't need to fully just trust the signature on the treaty, but you actually have technological ways to verify.
Right. Yeah, I want to pick up on the don't make the same mistake again. I'm struck by the shift over the last couple of years because I was in Milton Keynes and Bletchley Park when at the AI Safety Summit 2 years ago when you were speaking about these issues. And you have your AI safety report, and at the time, the Bletchley Declaration had a bunch of countries, including China and the U.S., agreeing to cooperate on governance for AI solutions. I don't know that that's quite how it's played out.
That's right.
What's happened in those 2 years?
I think it's very simple, actually. There are a few very powerful people who have different views about the future. And look at the $100 million super PAC that's been set up to fight Congress people who would be in favor of AI regulation, right? I mean, that's and look at what's happened in government, where big tech is now become in bed with the government in ways that I think we've never seen in history as much. I mean, of course, there's like the late 19th century, early 20th century history where politics and concentration of economic power have been very strongly bad. And we came out of that with stronger laws, antitrust laws, and so on. So I think we are in a very dangerous place in terms of our democracy and the dangers that can come from not seeing humans at the center of our future. So, yeah, I'm worried.
Let me ask you about the flip side of that, which is the public or publics.
Yes.
We were talking a little bit about the expertise that it takes to understand what the results of transparency mean in these models. How does a public that has to send their kids to school and get through the day on their jobs and root for the Blue Jays, a thing we're all doing this week, find the time or the education to understand these issues and how to engage with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it all depends on the understanding and awareness of how critical this will be. If there was a war tomorrow morning, everyone would read the newspaper and try to understand what is going on and why, and it would be central in people's lives because they would know that their life, their children's life is at stake. And right now, there isn't that perception. But in my opinion, our future, our lives, our democracies are at stake. And so if and when the public understands this, I think lots of good things will follow. But we haven't reached that stage. Look at how much time it has taken for a better understanding of the climate risks, for example, decades. The problem is, well, we haven't, made enough progress yet, even on public opinion. And we don't have 30 years to solve this problem. It might be something in our face in 5 years, 10, maybe even earlier, according to some of the people involved.
I'm interested in this from the perspective of that there's sometimes a gap when you spend a lot of time in this industry between, you have the OpenAI and Anthropic and the people that run those companies talking about sort of the sheer powerful capabilities of it. Some of these job loss predictions and so on come from people who have an incentive to talk up the capabilities of their model. And then on the other hand, you have all these stories about, that MIT study from a little while ago about 97% of pilots not resulting in action. And when I talk to people, just sort of ordinary people, they get caught between those two. Like, how is this so capable but not capable of doing anything?
There's a very easy answer to this.
Yeah.
It's what I started with. It's a mistake to think of AI as it is now. You have to look at the trajectory over the last decade. And the trajectory is exponential progress on metrics like how do you do the job that a human would do. And so, yeah, it's very compatible that we have AIs that are, good on some things, but very weak on other things. And so in the practical situation of a task that a human would do on their job, they're not competitive. And so people will complain rightfully that they do unacceptable mistakes, for example. But it is not incompatible with the idea that, oh, but wait, 2 years ago, they were 100 times worse.
Right.
And what people like Dario Amodei is saying is not now. He's saying in 2 years, 3 years, they will take many of the jobs or the tasks that are involved in human labor. So that's the way to think about it.
So I want to end by talking a little bit about your engagement on this topic, because I think it in and of itself has become something of an interesting topic. There's some irony, or perhaps at least comedy, in the fact that we're sitting by a giant sign that says "attention," the AI era we're in now starts with a paper. In some ways, starts with a paper called "Attention is All You Need," which introduces this architecture called the transformer, and that's the T in ChatGPT. It kicks off this new era of AI discussion, but also AI progress. You spent a lot of the last few years talking about these topics and trying to raise awareness of these risks. And look, let me ask you a slightly rude question here. Do you think that your advocacy and your public education on this topic, do you think it's working?
Yes. I see many more people suddenly listening, suddenly taking time to read about it. 2 years ago when we had the Bletchley Park meeting, it was still kind of like, ooh, science fiction-y. But people are starting to be worried now. And so it's funny, like I do see this movement at the same time as more citizens, more researchers in my community and many other communities are slowly digesting the idea that, oh, we are building machines that are becoming smarter and smarter. Because we can see it in the last just 3 years, personal experience. I don't know if some of you have played with the first ChatGPT and now think back, compare with now. I mean, there's the benchmarks that scientists do, but your personal experience should tell you something is going on.
Right.
And so the awareness is growing. At the same time, there's a counterforce of mostly companies and investors who just want to go as fast as possible and are willing to take risks with our society in order to be the first, because they think it's a winner-take-all game, that the first people, the first companies will get to human level, AGI, ASI, whatever, will just dominate everything. It's a domination game.
So in the last couple of minutes here, let's talk about what the future looks like a little bit. We had a speaker on stage just before us talking about the need for alternatives, and you're building something of an alternative with, or at least a guardrail with Scientist AI. Are these companies that you're talking about that are looking to dominate these industries, are they still not big enough that alternatives can emerge? Can we get to a state where those alternatives can be viable in a market where these companies have so much money and so much data?
Yes, otherwise I wouldn't be, working on this. Totally think that, well, there are several ways in which small groups like the nonprofit I created and academics and others in the world can influence the trajectory. So one is develop methodology that will provide much greater assurances of safety and ethical behavior. And then they don't have to build the most powerful AI with that. They just have to demonstrate that the methodology works, that it doesn't compromise on capability, but you get something safer. And then, it's not like these companies actually want to create, dangerous AIs. If you were to give them on a platter how you can change your methodology so that it's going to be behaving better, they would take it. It's just that they're not incentivized to do that right now. And then the other path, which is not incompatible with the first one, is what we discussed about a third pole, outside of the US and China, where many small players can gang up together, many middle powers in terms of countries can gang up together and invest towards AI systems that would be competitive with the frontier. You think about DeepSeek, in 2 years, small group of like 25 people. I mean, it doesn't take 50 billion to do that.
Right.
So I think there's a perception in many places, many countries that, oh, it's too late, there's nothing to do, it's too big, we can't, bridge the gap. It's a mistake. It's a huge mistake.
So you've got a bunch of people in the room, including some people who actively make policy and a lot of people who shape policy. What is, 2 years from now, the thing you hope they will have helped achieve in this domain?
I hope that policy makers and also owners of companies, investors in companies, will understand that if we just continue business as usual, there's a significant chance, maybe 10%, 20%, 50%, I don't know, that we will be eaten alive economically, politically, and militarily by those who control much more powerful AI systems. So in a way, it's like we see this fire coming towards our house, and maybe it's going to be fine. It's going to go just by, and we'll make a nice deal with our friends who have the power. But there's no guarantee. So we should definitely do something about the trees around us and build some safeguards, buy some insurance in case things go badly, do things that will mitigate the risks. But not seeing this as like a normal investment, but as a defensive investment, because we might lose everything else. We might lose our democracy. We might lose our companies. We might be in a situation where our local companies basically close because they're not competitive. And at the same time, lots of people lose their job, and governments don't have, their fiscal base is shrinking and the needs are increasing. So there's like so many reasons why we should be waking up and realizing we have to quickly do everything we can, multiple bets, in order to mitigate those risks.
Well, that is our time. Thank you so much for being here with us. And thank you all.